Hello, and welcome to Sir's Bakers. Today we're going to be making puff pastry. This is an amazing product that you can use for all sorts of things. You can make pinwheels with fruits or with chocolate or with cream cheese. So many different things you can do with it. The way it works is you fold in butter layers in between dough layers. And what that does is when it bakes, it steams up let one layer at a time, which puffs it up hugely. So to get it started, we gotta get some butter, form it into a square, just like so, and then we're gonna freeze it. It needs to be very cold. I use cold butter because it's super easy to make the square, just like this, and then make sure you put it into the fridge to make sure that it's nice and hard. Just like that. I use this recipe for my apple cages, for my, about that thick too. And I'm going to be testing out strudel, like a, what would it be called? Like an apricot strudel recipe kind of thing. We'll see how it turns out. Because this is going through a lot of stress when that butter steams up and steams up and steams up, I'm going to use a lot of bread flour to be the strength of it, and then add a bit of pastry flour to make sure it's not too chewy and not too tough. Just to get that perfect consistency. Add a little bit of salt there too. Just like that. Gotta make sure it's nice and delicious. And of course, more butter. This uses a lot of butter. Probably pound or a bit more maybe. So the way this works is we're just going to make this into a nice ball. Just rub this in, and then we're going to put in cold water. We don't want this butter to be melting. With some egg. Just to make it a little bit more rich. So once these butters are rubbed in nicely, just like so, we're going to add in the water and the liquid to make it into a dough. You see, I'm using my palms a little too much here. You should probably make sure that only your fingers are being used to not melt that butter. There we go. Let's add that cold water. Make sure it's cold. There we go. Almost done. There we go. Perfect. Remember, the recipe will be in the description below. I also recommend looking at the apple cages recipe and the apricot. I don't know what to call it yet. We'll see. I'm going to play around with it, but there's going to be a new video coming out soon. I apologize. I don't use egg in this recipe. I might think about changing that, but we'll see. It has a lot of butter already in it. I probably don't need to make it any more rich. Yeah, I probably won't use egg. Never mind. Yeah, just don't use the egg. So now that this dough is nice, formed a ball, it's a little. You gotta make sure it's just like bread, bounces back at you. Because again, this is gonna go through a lot of stress for each layer of steam that puffs it up. So make sure it's nice and strong. I'm just going to tighten it up right at the end to form that nice ball. Dragging it out on the bottom. Make sure that butt is on the bottom. And what we're going to do is we're going to cut an X into it. You'll see why later. Then we're going to wrap it and then put it in the fridge to rest so that it's easier to roll out with the rolling pin. There we go. Don't worry about squishing it or anything. Just don't form it back into the ball. There we go. Wrap it nice. You don't want any of it to dry out. See? Perfect X. There we go. Now that it's rested for half an hour, you can go longer. It doesn't really matter. Half an hour is the minimum, though. Make sure you do that, or it's going to be really tough to work with. Remember, there's a lot of bread flour in there. A lot of gluten that's going to make it hard. Because I cut that X in, look how easy it is to start that square. Because we want to make a square. Right there, already halfway done. Just because I put an X in before I started rolling. There we go. We're just going to roll it into basically double the square of your butter. So about that size. Make sure that your butter's cold, like I said. It should come off nicely if you use parchment paper. There we go. Now, I mess up here. What you're supposed to do is put your butter offset, like to be a diamond. And when you cover it, it only covers the butter and it doesn't cover extra dough. Because if you have dough over dough, that stuff won't puff up because there's no butter to puff it up. Now, to fix this, because I wasn't realizing what I was doing wrong, I just made sure that the dough covered it and didn't cover other dough. So I make sure that it's fully a square. See how I lift that up to make sure? But if you offset it into a diamond, you won't have to do that. You'll just pull each corner over top and it will fit right in the middle and be fine. There we go. Perfect. Now make sure you put a lot, not a lot of flour, but at least some flour to make sure that it doesn't rip. If this rips, you're ripping the layers. The layers are the most important thing. And we're just going to roll it out to about that length, and then we're going to do a single fold. And after every fold, we're going to poke it to make sure we know what stage we're on. I always like to do 2 single folds, then 2 double folds. And what that ends up doing is making, let's see, 3 times 3 is 9. 9 times 4 is 36. 36 times 4 is 144. So this will end up being 144 layers of dough, butter, dough, butter, dough, butter. And that's what gets you that rise. I like to do 2 singles first to get the easy out of the way, and then do the 2 double in the end. And we're going to make sure again that it's nicely wrapped so that it doesn't dry out in the fridge. And the beautiful thing with this recipe is you can put it in the freezer, take it out, cut off the piece you need, put it back in the freezer, and it will last months. It's an amazing tool to have in your bakery. So once it's rested another half an hour, make sure you have that flour. You don't want it ripping. You can start rolling it out again and start the next fold. I know there's a lot of butter in this recipe, but I'm still debating a little bit to add more for the square you make. I might add another 1/4 pound, which sounds like a lot, but again, with baking, it's not that healthy to begin with, so you might as well make it taste good. So we're going to do another single fold, which you just fold a third into a third. There you go, just like you saw. And then we're going to, I just like to pound it a little bit to make sure it's nice and flat. And then I like to make sure that the corners are nice and square. If at any point it's not nice and square, there's going to be dough over dough instead of dough butter for the layers, and those parts won't rise and other parts will rise, which will get you a product that doesn't look as nice, doesn't taste as nice. So keep that in mind when you're making this. So another half an hour. This is a very labor intensive product, and make sure you get your 2 dots. Don't poke too hard to rip through it, but poke it hard enough that you can see which stage you're on. Because if you're in your bakery or just at home and someone's helping you, that other person needs to know what stage you're on too. So if I'm at the bakery and anyone's working on puff pastry and they have to step aside to decorate a cake or whatever, I come in and I'm like, oh, what can I do? Oh, puff pastry. I look in there. Oh, it's at stage 3. I can do this. Or it's on stage 2. I can do this. So this is the double fold or a book fold. So you fold it in like a book, a little offset. So one side a little further than the other side, and then you fold it in half. The reason why you do it a little offset is, again, to make sure there's not as many dough over dough layers. And because this gets super thick, I always like to roll it just a little bit after, just to get it started for the next round. Now I'm on stage 3. One more stage to go. This is very similar for when you make croissants and danishes, where you use this kind of dough, except for you add yeast to it, which makes it even harder because you have to work fast and cold so that the yeast doesn't start rising. But the good news is you don't have to use as much folding. For example, with a croissant, I might only get 36 layers, so I might do 2 singles and a double. But when you don't have that yeast to give that extra rise, you have to go further, and that's why I'm going 144 layers. This doesn't have to be 144. You could do 4 singles, and that would be 27 times 3 is 81. So, yeah, 81's not that bad. So, again, make sure you know what you want. 81's going to get a slightly less rise, but it's not going to be a huge deal. And if the book fold's a little difficult, you can avoid it. Now, I didn't let it rest enough here. I only let it rest like probably 20 minutes. If you ever get to this point and you didn't let it rest enough, just put it in the fridge. Just let it rest again. The mistake I did do there, though, I didn't put the numbers again. I should have poked 3 holes, well, not holes, 3 dots to make sure I knew what stage I was on, just to get into the habit, so that later on I don't mess that up. Because if I just put that back, it looks like it's on stage 1. And if it's on stage 1 and you fold it even more, you're going to overwork it and make it too much layers. You don't want too much, you don't want too little. So now that I let it rest, and it rolled out nicely, we're going to do one more book fold or double fold. Okay. And again, we're going to off-center it. See, one side's a bit over the middle. And we're going to fold it in half. Perfect. Now this is a bit chunky, so I'm going to push it down. Try and roll it just a little bit so that it's easier to work with when I use it later. So later on, when you need this, just cut a bit off, and then that you'll need, so you can weigh it out. You can just pound it. Just be very careful not to rip it. Yeah, so cut a piece off, weigh what you need, and then use it for your recipe. Put the rest back in the freezer. Very, very easy and beautiful product. Now, the terrible thing about this product, though, is if you've messed up, like you made too many rips, or you folded dough over dough too much, you can't find out until you use it. So, I don't know if this is good yet, but we'll find out when I start making those apricot treats. We'll find out what I make with them. And I'm going to wrap it real nicely so that there's no problems with it. I don't want this to dry out, and I don't want it to get freezer burned, so we're going to wrap it really good. Don't be afraid to use a lot of wrapping on this one. After all, that was 4 hours, 5 hours of work. You don't want to be messing that up. And then there you go. The last step. Put those 4 dots and you're done. This is what it turns out like. We'll see later on what I do with it. If you like this video, please like and subscribe. You can follow me on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram. I even have my own website. Thank you, and have a nice day.